Before this pandemic, coworkers rarely saw each other's homes on a regular basis. Even socially, most people didn't have people over daily. But in this COVID era, where so much of our life has moved online, video conferencing has changed that almost overnight. It's meant different things to different people, and it turns out seems to reveal some differences in how men and women present themselves. With us now to explore that, in London, Ontario, my hometown, Shauna Burke, Associate Professor and Faculty Scholar in the School of Health Studies at Ryerson University. And Treena Orchard, Associate Professor and Undergraduate Chair, also at Western School of Health Studies. And in Ontario's capital city, Kristopher Alexander, Assistant Professor at Ryerson University's RTA School of Media. Welcome to you all. So nice to have you all here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
And can I just say, since we're talking about Zoom, all your backgrounds are perfection.
Thank you.
So, although Zoom, and I looked this up actually, Zoom was created back in 2011, but most of us hadn't heard of it until this past year, and it's become an integral part of our daily lives. I wanted to get a sense from all of you. What do you think have been some of the benefits of connecting via video while we navigate the pandemic? Shauna, I'll start with you.
Sure. And Nam, thank you so much for having us today for this really, I think, interesting and important conversation. First of all, I'll start with just connectedness. Connectedness has always been essential to being human. And of course, as humans, we have this fundamental need and desire to interact and to form meaningful relationships with people. And of course, with the pandemic and the necessary public health measures that we are following and practicing, it's really been difficult to share and enjoy these meaningful in-person interactions. So while I think most people would argue that in-person connections are impossible to replace or to even replicate with technology, online platforms, I think, like Zoom, have really restored this kind of sense of togetherness. And many of us have been navigating our lives online for close to a year now. And at least for Treena and I, a big part of that in our work environment has been Zoom, which led to our observations in the article that we co-authored.
We're going to talk more about that article. And it is hard to imagine or to believe that it's almost a year. Kristopher, I want to ask you that same question.
I have a very different perspective on it. And I do agree with Shauna and Treena. Their article is brilliantly written. Also, thank you for having me here. It is an honor to be here. And I think that what it has done for some people, including myself, is it allowed me to circumvent get into different rooms, have a seat at a table, for example. Setting up lighting and these kinds of things, color correction has afforded me the opportunity to have people say, oh, let's get Chris in there. So that's one maybe hidden benefit of the Zoom culture.
And I know for us too, as a production team, we've been able to get people that we might not be able to get unless they were in town. So it's also been a benefit for us. Treena, I want to ask you the same question.
Sure. And I think I agree with everything else that the other panelists have said. And I think that Zoom's also enabled us to continue the flow of regular life. It's enabled our everyday work interactions, meetings, student engagements, classroom activities, and all of that to continue. It's all different in the new sort of COVID setting, but Zoom has enabled us to carry out these activities in the similar way that we did in the past. And so it kind of makes this precarious situation feel a little bit more normal.
And Treena, I want to ask you the next question. You know, studies have shown that women have been disproportionately impacted during the pandemic from job losses, juggling, working from home, or helping their kids with online learning. Although in my household, my husband is the patient one, so he does the bulk of that because I am not patient. When we talk about, when we look at that, what impact has Zoom had on women getting their voices heard? Has it been a leveler?
That's a really important question. I just want to make a bit of a caveat statement at the outset here that the observations that are based on that we spoke about in the article are just sort of general observations. And we're not saying that all women do one thing or all men do another thing. And I think that's important to just sort of say at the outset. But I think definitely looking at the lives of a lot of my colleagues, especially the women, they are typically the ones who remained at home with the children more often. And so Zoom has really, I think there's a fear that it has done a real, it's been an injustice for a lot of women because it feels like it's really set them back and sort of firmly placed them in the domestic sphere, more so than domestic as well as occupational.
And just to build on that, Shauna, what have been some of the, I guess, disadvantages to this, I guess, Zoom culture that we're living in right now?
Well, I think we hear a lot about Zoom fatigue is one. And, there was a recent article in the National Geographic about Zoom fatigue. It's very different. And as noted in that article, it can be hard on the brain. We're looking at these Brady Bunch boxes of people and those normal sort of nonverbal, more subtle cues that we typically rely on and gather a lot of information from in our interactions and to feel connected are gone. And so we're really relying on words and eye contact if we can find people's eyes. And that's really difficult and also really draining.
Do you think that, because I know when we have pitch meetings in the before times, we would all be sitting on one table and people are doing multiple things because we do live in a culture where you have to multitask to get everything done. Do you think that employers need to be a bit more generous to their employees when it comes to like maybe having the camera on, or if you do have your camera on and you're on your phone, checking something on your phone?
I think that's such an excellent question and a really important consideration. I know as an instructor at the university and teaching large classes, I never require my students to have their camera on, and I do that very purposefully. I think, the pandemic is difficult for so many reasons on so many different people, and we don't know the challenges necessarily that people are experiencing and facing. And so there could be very valid reasons why people don't want to or can't have their cameras on. And so I think that's an important consideration for people as well.
And Kristopher, my kids are 9 and 7, I think. Yes, they are.
Okay.
My son just turned 10. And I know I can overhear their teachers explaining different things to them, which sometimes feels awkward. It feels like I'm kind of like spying on them. But my kids need me to be there. And I often hear their teachers telling them to turn on mute or turn off the camera. Obviously you're teaching much older students. What's your approach to to teaching or even meeting over video?
Well, the approach I take, I will admit, it's very video game centric. I am a Twitch streamer and a YouTube content creator. So a lot of that when going live with audiences affords the ability of interactivity between the presenter and the audience. So some of the things I do in the classroom is I have a live on-screen text chat where students are able to ask questions. They pop up on screen, I see them, and then react to them. So that it really boils down to interactivity and engagement. And those are one of the ways that I sort of facilitate in the classroom. But a lot of what we're seeing now, particularly when it comes to Zoom fatigue, my understanding is a lot to do with dopamine and really what we're accustomed to seeing on the internet. And I know we're going to get into this, but it usually boils down to what we're used to seeing beyond the screen and then what's going on, right? So everybody's busy, everybody's got a lot on their plate, but being able to engage with an audience, which is kind of what it's been particularly for me in the classroom. And, I have a slight advantage. I'm talking about video games and esports, but
so you have their attention already.
Exactly. I have their attention already.
Are there any benefits for you as a teacher teaching over Zoom?
For me, absolutely. I'm able to reach out to a wider audience. I'm able to engage with students on platforms like Discord, which many gamers are already used to and a part of. So we'll run classrooms through Discord, for example, and they're used to engaging there, but they can access their assignments there, and I'm able to pin and post things to the group. So for me, it's actually widened my practice, I feel, in a beneficial way. It's not the same for everybody, but for me, in my particular lane, with regard to video games and all the culture surrounding it, we are an online, engaging, bi-directional culture in many situations.
Treena, the article you wrote with Shauna for the conversation looked at some ways that men and women approach appearing on camera. One of the arguments you made is that women are more used to being looked at. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think it's a fairly well-known fact that, in our patriarchal society, women and men are viewed in very different ways. And there is almost a natural aspect of our everyday culture where women are sexualized, They're understood in very different ways in terms of their physical appearance. Physical appearance means different things. There's different relationships between how you look and your social status, perhaps your occupational prospects, things like that. And one of the comments that we've heard from some of our male colleagues after Zoom meetings is that not only is there the fatigue, but that part of the fatigue is about needing to feel sort of guarded against being looked at all the time by people that they're not used to looking at them. And in many ways, women are quite used to being looked at on a regular basis. It doesn't mean that we enjoy it, but it is part of our dominant culture. And so in that way, it's quite different for women and men.
I know at the beginning you said that the research that you're doing has been general so far, but I just wanted to ask, what about people who are non-binary? Where do they fit into this conversation?
That's a very good question, and it's something that we don't know much about because there's very little written about Zoom and gender in general, which I think is one of the reasons why our article has received a lot of interesting attention. There's a lot of articles about Zoom and fatigue, but not so much about how we experience it across the gender spectrum. And in conjunction with my earlier comment about not wanting to appear as though we think that women all do one thing and men all do another thing, we also want to draw attention to the fact that the article that we wrote is fairly heteronormative, and there is a wealth of other experiences and different aspects that I think will be really important to explore going forward.
I've mentioned the article a couple of times, but I'd like to read a passage from that article that you and Shauna wrote. During the pandemic, the spatial distinctions between office and home are eroding because many of us now work in the places where we live. This transition may be especially challenging for men who mostly prefer clear definitions between office and domestic spaces. In light of this, one suggestion is that men may use specialty Zoom backgrounds as a creative way to exact a sense of control over their new work environments that no longer reflect the masculine design they are used to. Again, at the risk of generalizing, which is not what we're trying to do, but Kristopher, since you are you are the only man on this panel, in your view, why might men change their backgrounds more than women?
I don't really know much about that at all. I just know for myself, and I did read the article. It's very interesting. One thing, just with regard to the last point regarding being used to being looked at, there are some, even in my situation, who aren't afforded the ability to not think about people looking at them. So, for example, the way that I present myself on Zoom is the way that I, in often cases, must present myself in the workforce. That is buttoned up, tucked in. Yes, I do my hair. A little baby powder to reflect shine, all these things. But this is something that I've had to do to navigate the working world. And that's an interesting element of the study itself that I was interested in just commenting on. The other thing, this background in the back here, those are cedar boards that a buddy of mine, his consultant, he taught me how to put up cedar boards because I was interested in, and as a disclaimer, I'm trained in broadcast television. So I'm interested in putting plants in the background, setting up scenes and all of this, because going back to Zoom as a tool of empowerment, there's a lot of conversation about what people see, but we should start to explore the dialogue of how we can, in some instances, control what people see. So these boards back here, they're not fake. I placed them up with a buddy of mine. He did most of the work because he was teaching me about it, but it smells like a sauna. And part of that was to try and establish what I feel is our cameras now a window into opportunity and possibility based on our ability to sort of in some ways shape the gaze. That was also discussed in the article. So I don't change my background very much unless I'm in the classroom and I'm switching to a concept that, like, for example, I'm putting together a pitch that teaches elementary schools kids how to code, and I have a code-based background that I bring up contextually to show statistics about coding. Et en français aussi, I'm working on it in French as well. But that's a way that I use the Zoom and the backgrounds to transport our viewers into what we're trying to learn. And in my case, it's often different things, coding, as well as video games and esports.
I'm obsessed with design, and I didn't realize I was such a voyeur. I think that's what I would call myself. But I really enjoy seeing people's backgrounds, and I guess maybe it shows me. I feel maybe like I know them a little bit better by seeing their backgrounds. But Shauna, I wanted to ask you that question then. Why might men change their backgrounds more than women?
Well, I think it's, one thing I will mention going back to the connectedness piece about the background and then something that you just said as well is I think, one of the possibilities with being interested in people's backgrounds, especially, for coworkers that maybe you haven't seen in person in a year, is that we kind of learn about them, right? We get to see them in their real kind of unedited, sometimes staged homes, but we're seeing that kind of human side of people and kind of in their own homes. And sometimes I feel like we're learning about coworkers and in ways that maybe we wouldn't have prior. So in some ways, I feel like it can enhance that feeling of connectedness with our coworkers as well.
And Treena, just to go on what Shauna was just saying, and to talk more about the differences between men and women, what are some other differences of note between men and women in this Zoom culture?
Yeah, and that was one of the key things that we discussed in the article. We're trying to make sense of our observation that, based on hundreds of meetings, it was evident that men use the custom backgrounds much more frequently than women. And we're trying to think about why might that be? I think there is the creative kind of fun kind of game piece for sure. But I think that in general, women are used to occupying multiple spaces on a regular basis. Not that there isn't a distinction between home and the office, but I think women move between different spaces more regularly. And so the shift from the office to working in domestic spaces hasn't been as much of a transition for them as it has been for some men. And I think that using the custom background, it's a fun thing. It's also used to hide clutter. There are practical reasons. But I think for some people, it's also a way to anchor a space and mark it as work, when it is not taking place in an office, but it's in the home. So it's a way of sort of workifying a domestic space.
And Shauna, do you think that women self-consciously stage their homes or rooms for video meetings?
I only have sort of anecdotal evidence, if you will, on this, and I do. I think that a lot of women do spend a lot of time thinking about their backgrounds, and likely lots of men as well. I can speak from personal experience. My partner also teaches an online class, and he does not care what's in the background, and I'm shuffling him around and setting things up and telling him to move his chair over a little bit. So again, something that would be worth looking into a little bit more rigorously in the future for sure.
That sounds like me, except I'm telling my children to leave the background. Anytime the Zoom comes on, they're like, "We're ready to perform." I'm like, "No, not right now." Kristopher, I know we touched on it a little bit about video games, but can you tell us a bit more about the influence of gaming and YouTube on the way people approach video calls?
Amazing. So I think that's what you'll find, and a lot of my work starts to delve into this. That's the disconnect we're finding here. Back to dopaminergic pathways, I'm not remembering, but with regard to dopamine, particularly gamers, they're used to a certain level of engagement with the person on the other side of the screen, especially if they're watching Twitch and YouTube. And transitioning that into post-secondary institutions, some streams go on for 7 hours, like Awesome Games Done Quick, where people are speed running games live in front of an audience. The audience is engaging with them. But now put that same human in front of a post-secondary lecture where I'm hearing some teachers are preventing students from chatting and interacting. And as a gamer, I'm hearing these things. I'm like, ooh, I'm not sure they're aware of what's going on YouTube and Twitch, because in my classroom, the students, their interactivity is of critical and utmost importance. They need to see their questions on screen. They need to see when they're chatting, I call them out by name and say, "Hey, what did you mean by that?" And they get it. Oh, he's talking to me, just like what happens with this video game culture. And it's fun to talk about the playing of video games, but the cultures, broadcast, interactivity, all those things surrounding the discipline are what I feel can enhance classroom instruction, not just in elementary, but also in post-secondary.
I want to ask you, all of you this next question. And I'll start with you, Kristopher, just to build on what you were saying. This whole Zoom culture is new to a lot of people. And what I said before about, listening, I feel like I'm spying on my kids' teachers, but there's really nowhere for me to go because I need to be around the kids to help them navigate the online space. But do you think that there is a worry about being judged unfairly by how professionally you present yourself online? Kristopher, I'll start with you.
Well, as mentioned earlier, I have had no choice but to worry about my professional appearance my entire life. As you can see by I constantly repositioning my tie for this particular engagement. But I'm not sure about the worry as much as it is navigating that worry. For example, in my particular case, in meetings, everybody knows when my kids are in the room because I start speaking in French, and they're all like, "Oh, let's hear him speak in French," right? So again, just with the gaze, we're able to create conventions that indicate to our viewers in meeting or student or otherwise what's happening right now. And the amount of care, like I hear students say, "Oh, whenever your daughters come in, Chris, you always get so soft and nice," and we love hearing that. And they joke about it, but I know they know that, oh, they get to see a little bit, oh, he really loves his kids, mais en français. But that's a way that I can explain my life, my story, via the way that they see me. So the kids interrupting, me interacting not in just based on, the way that my wife and I deal with our kids, shows the students that I care about my own kids, but also shows them, hey, I care about them as well.
This is off topic, but do they listen to you better in French than English? I need notes. I need help. We'll talk afterwards. But Treena and Shauna, I want to ask you the same question. Do you think there is a worry about being judged unfairly by how professionally you present yourself online? Shauna, I'll start with you.
I think it's definitely a consideration. I mean, it's definitely something that's always in my mind. I'm asking my kids it when I have really important work meetings to be quiet and be in a different room. But I also think, again, there can be real beauty in kind of this humanness and seeing people in their lives and in their family lives, again, in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise. And so I think, it's just real. I mean, we're all living through this pandemic and there's going to be interruptions. And in my one large class that I teach, I started creating a blooper reel with all of the interruptions that I was experiencing. I thought these are too good to just delete. And so I started saving them and putting them at the end of my lectures just for some kind of comic relief, because it's life, right? I've got kids and pets and a partner. And so my house is loud. And so, I think there can be some benefits as well.
And Treena?
Yeah, I think I don't have any children or a live-in partner, but I do have 2 cats, one of whom is extremely vocal. And a number of my meetings have been interrupted by Elliot, and there's nothing I can do because she is the center of my universe and we're in her house. Okay, so that is often comical and it doesn't last for a whole meeting, but it's time away. It's a little unprofessional. However, in my classes pre-Zoom and during COVID, I always talk about my cats. I talk about my home. I talk about my family, my little nephews. So I think for a lot of students, they really love to see, okay, this is her house, and it's the same when they come to my office, which is where my office at the university, which is where I'm talking from today. There's a really chill, therapeutic vibe, and it's a really welcoming space. And I think even visually through Zoom, they can assess and appreciate that.
I think one thing that Zoom culture is exposing is kind of like the messiness of life and how human we all are. And speaking of, a year ago, we saw a viral clip that when it first came out, we were just like, what happened? But we'll talk about it after. Sheldon, could you please roll?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me. Pardon me. My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies.
Sorry, we were laughing about that. And actually, that clip came out in 2017. So it came out way before its time. And Shauna, at the time, we all thought how unusual it was for kids to run into the shot. Now we see it every day, and we see pets. How important is it for employers and colleagues to take that in stride when kids or pets appear?
I think, first of all, I can't believe that was so long ago. And yes, how strange at the time it seemed and atypical, whereas now I feel like, in most meetings that I'm a part of, there's, things like that happening all the time. And fortunately, I think, Treena and I work in an environment that's very accepting and tolerating and welcoming, actually, I would say, in lots of instances of these types of interruptions. And so I think it's just, it's something that we've obviously not lived through before. And like, all of the lessons I think that people are taking away from this time is patience and understanding and kindness, and understanding that people are human.
And Chris, what advice would you give for people when this happens, when someone's pet walks onto the Zoom call or their children come into the call?
Well, when it happens to me, often baby just wants to come in and say, "Hey, yo, daddy, what you doing?" I come in, "Okay, vas-y, or allons-y." And then they come and then they'll peek and they just see a little eye and everybody just melts. They're like, "Oh man, this guy," So as mentioned previously, a lot of these are opportunities to show people your warmth, your care, and in my case, shatter a lot of stereotypes about fatherhood, presence, and just engagement with family.
You'd like to think that, people will be understanding about seeing the cute pet, because who doesn't like a cute cat or a cute, child's face? But Treena, in some situations, I think this does cause a lot of stress, because even though we're at home, we're also working from home, and there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. Do you think that this is a disadvantage for women?
I think it's definitely gendered, and I think that looking at the observations over the last almost year of when these I don't want to say interruptions, but when these things occur, 99% of the time it's with my female colleagues, whether it's other professors or our staff. So that's fairly revealing. And I think that, like you said, there is usually initially a rather stricken look on people's faces. We've got it, but then I think over time we have seen that kind of evolve to a more gradual kind of acceptance, and, sort of welcoming the child or the pet onto the screen, because it does offer a little bit of relief and kind of comic kind of nature, and also a reminder that, we're not perfect. And work is not really just a hard bound thing, and now it's taking place in other spaces where we live. And so naturally there's going to be overflow between, domestic and work and our children, right? And our pets. So I think we've become a lot more welcoming of it, which is very positive.
We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but Shauna, what is Zoom fatigue?
Well, I'm definitely not an expert in Zoom fatigue, but my understanding of it is that, again, it's just this. It's really tough on our psyche. It's very complicated, and being, communicating with people in a virtual setting or environment where, again, we don't necessarily have access to all of these nonverbal cues. Even just the excuse me, somebody taking a breath before they're about to speak. How many times have you interrupted or been interrupted on Zoom? All of these things are really challenging and hard work, and I think can be very overwhelming and exhausting when, again, we're focusing just on people's words, and, again, not having access to a lot of the ways we typically would communicate in person.
And Treena, we've talked about the benefits of Zoom and online conferencing. It's allowed a lot of us to be able to work from home. What do you think, though, that we've lost by not having in-person, face-to-face connections?
Well, I think what we've lost is, the scent and the feel of one another, and also the casual ways that we can interact. Like I miss, cruising down the hallway, bumping into my colleagues or my students, just kind of accidentally. And that's such a powerful way to maintain relationships and, continue the things that you're working with, and just getting caught up on one another's lives. Now I think we're all schedulers. It's either you got to pick up the phone or you got to arrange a Zoom and make sure everyone's got the link and this is the password. We have to do all that just to connect. And so I think it can be liberating and fun, and it's a good way to access each other, and it allows the work environment to keep going. But I think a lot of us really miss that touch and sight, and, like I said, smell of one another, and just seeing each other in a way that we're used to.
We talk a lot about the after times and what that might look like moving forward. Kristopher, what do you think in the future, when all this is said and done, what aspects of video calling will we look back onto on a regular world and incorporate into that world?
What I'm excited about, just to get back to, in addition to answering the question, some of the things I've lost via Zoom is hidden cues of who's hip to what's going on, who's connected, and what I've gained well, I've lost some of the non-pragmatic elements of the work. What is the task? Let me execute those. The other thing that I've gained is a incredible amount of time with my kids. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, both of my parents were laid off, and they had the similar amount of time that I'm now able to have with my kids. And I'm like, oh my goodness, had this not happened, I wouldn't have had upwards of, the amount of time I'm able to connect with them, because my wife and I, we pretty much equally share the childbearing, why did I say that? No way. The child taking care of responsibilities. My wife's gonna kill me. No, love, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Anyway, so it's written, she knows. So yeah, some of the losses are some of this hidden corporate culture that often gets said behind closed doors. You have to really talk about the task now and the gains to the family, of course. So when this is all over, there's some of the bits that I actually kind of appreciate still. Like, hey, this is what needs to be done. Let's do that. Not, well, you know how Chris is. Like, that's all gone with Zoom meetings now. You know how Chris is. That stuff that used to happen, it's tougher to execute. So that's my perspective on it all. Anyways, it's not the same for everybody, but that's one of the things I like to look at the benefits of some of these things.
Well, thank you so much for all of your insights. This has been a fun and educational chat, and that's all the time we have tonight. We appreciate you taking some time for us tonight on the agenda.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great. Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.